Welcome to the deep dive. I think many of us, maybe you listening right now, have probably spent a lot of time asking that really painful question. What's wrong with me? What's fundamentally wrong with my mind?
Yeah, that feeling, that sense that you're somehow flawed or running on a buggy operating system, it's exhausting.
Exactly. So today, we're taking that question and we're just tossing it out, replacing it with something much more constructive, hopefully more empowering. How is my mind actually built?
That really is the mission here. It's a pretty radical paradigm shift we're aiming for, moving away from what the source material calls these old, fraying spells of, conventional psychology.
The ones that focus on pathology, like what's broken.
Precisely,
Mhm.
focusing on what's broken, and instead adopting this lens of architecture,
Yeah.
asking, what is this system actually designed for?
And the language used in the sources. It's interesting. It's all systems engineering, CPU, RAM, BIOS, OS.
It is, and they're very specific about why. They say it's basically the most precise vocabulary we currently have.
To describe something so incredibly complex and dynamic.
Exactly, a complex, dynamic information processing system, which is, well, what the mind is.
So the big idea, the thesis is, your mind isn't broken, it's just specialized, highly specialized.
Just like computer hardware, different minds have different builds. Each one comes with its own unique strengths, but also crucially predictable trade-offs and different operational needs.
And understanding your specific build, that's the key. The first step towards managing your own internal world more effectively.
Becoming a compassionate, effective system administrator for yourself. Yeah.
Okay, before we dive into the specific components, the CPU and RAM and all that, we need to talk about something more foundational, the physics governing it all.
Yes, the law of energetic trade-offs. This
Yeah.
underpins everything else.
Energetic trade-offs.
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean in terms of how a mind works?
Well, think of it like this. Every mind, every single one, operates on a strictly finite energy budget. There's only so much juice to go around.
Okay, limited resources. Makes sense.
So this law basically dictates that if you develop any kind of specialized high-performance capacity, let's say, incredibly fast pattern recognition.
Like a really powerful processor.
Exactly. The energy needed for that gain has to be pulled, reallocated from some other function. That's the trade-off. You pay for specialization.
Ah, okay. So if my mind is built to be amazing at synthesizing information, I might have, I don't know, less energy for remembering grocery lists?
That's a perfect example. Or maybe less energy for basic procedural tasks, or even filtering sensory input. It has to come from somewhere.
Which means a struggle isn't necessarily a failure if I'm struggling with something.
Correct. A struggle in this model isn't a personal failing. It's often just the predictable outcome when a highly specialized system finds itself in an environment.
That demands the very thing it traded away.
Precisely. It immediately shifts the focus from self-blame, why can't I do this, to logistical management. Okay, this system isn't built for this task. How do I support it?
That reframing alone feels huge. And this framework, it even tackles emotions differently, doesn't it? It talks about somatic calculus.
It does. It argues that emotions aren't these, unpredictable, chaotic forces. They're more like direct physical readouts
Readouts of
of
this.
the system's computational state. Basically, your body telling you how the internal processing is going.
Okay, give me an example. How does that work?
Well, the sources define the feeling of contentment, for instance. Not as happiness necessarily, but as the physical sensation of an idle CPU. Your system is calm and reserved, not processing heavily.
Huh. An idle CPU. And what about feeling good, like having fun?
Fun, genuine fun, is described as the feeling of the system running at its optimal load. It's engaged, efficient, doing what it does best without being overloaded. It feels good because it is good, operationally speaking.
But wait, isn't that a bit clinical? Just reducing feelings to system states? Does it account for those really profound moments, like
Mhm.
insight?
It actually addresses that quite directly, that big aha moment, where everything suddenly clicks. The sources call that a quantum cognitive collapse.
Wow, okay. Quantum cognitive collapse. What does that mean?
It describes the state where a chaotic, high-load processing task trying to solve a complex problem suddenly resolves. It collapses into a single, elegant solution. And that feeling of intense relief, that rush,
Yeah.
that's the physical pressure release. The body is literally registering the massive computational efficiency that's just been achieved. It's a high-stakes process with a tangible physical payoff.
Okay, that connection between the physical feeling And the computational load.
Yep.
That makes it feel more grounded. Right, let's get into the building blocks then, the actual hardware specs.
So the sources define cognitive architecture using a set of spectrums. Your specific neurotype isn't a fixed box. It's more like your unique combination of settings on these different axes.
Makes sense. Where do we start? The CPU.
Let's start there. The CPU, the central processing unit. This is all about how you process information, how you think.
And there's a spectrum here too.
Yes, it runs from sequential processing on one end, think deep, linear, focused, single tasking.
Like methodically working through a list.
Exactly, to parallel processing on the other end. This is more about high-speed, nonlinear thinking, synthesizing lots of data streams at once, seeing patterns everywhere.
That sounds like the kind of mind that thrives on complexity. The high CPU type.
That's right. The high CPU system, which we'll dive into much more next time, experiences thought as almost chaotic. Simultaneous, thousands of data points connecting at once.
Which must make communication challenging.
Huh.
Trying to explain that internal state.
Oh, incredibly. The source describes the act of speaking directly from the CPU as intensely taxing. You're trying to translate this parallel, almost kaleidoscopic internal experience into linear language. It's frustrating.
I can imagine. Okay, so that's the CPU. What about RAM? Random access memory. That's the memory buffer, right?
Yes, your working buffer, your short-term storage, and again, a spectrum. You have high RAM systems.
Good at holding facts. Names, dates, instructions.
Excellent at holding that kind of static, linear data. And then you have low RAM systems defined by a much more limited buffer.
Okay, hold on. Why would a high-functioning mind, maybe one with that powerful high CPU, deliberately have low RAM? That seems counterintuitive.
Remember the law of energetic trade-offs.
Ah, it's a trade-off.
Exactly. Low RAM isn't a defect, it's a strategic trade-off. By limiting the RAM buffer, the system frees up enormous energy resources.
To power that expensive high-performance CPU.
Precisely. Think of an F1 car versus a big cargo truck. The F1 car has almost no storage space, right? It's sacrificed cargo capacity for speed and incredible processing power on the track.
So if someone feels constantly forgetful, needs to write everything down immediately, struggles with following step-by-step instructions, that might not be a flaw.
It might actually be evidence of a powerful, specialized processor optimized for synthesis and pattern matching, not for static data storage.
Wow. Okay, but how do they remember anything then?
They compensate. The sources call it rendering from a seed. Instead of storing the entire large memory file like a high RAM system might,
They score just a small piece.
a tiny core data point, a seed. And when they need the memory, their system rapidly regenerates or renders the whole thing in real time from that seed. It's like having an incredibly fast dynamic rendering engine instead of a static filing cabinet.
Rendering from a seed. That's a fascinating concept. Okay, so we have processor, CPU, memory, RAM. What about how the system gets its information? The input.
That brings us to the BIOS, the basic input-output system. This is described as the most foundational layer. It processes what the source calls the first language.
The first language. What's that?
That universal sort of pre-verbal language of raw emotion, systemic truth, gut feelings, the really deep down signals.
The BIOS has settings too.
A spectrum, yeah. From buffered, where there's a kind of filter dampening the intensity of the input, making it lower fidelity.
More manageable, maybe.
Potentially. To unbuffered, which is like having a direct high bandwidth connection to that first language, you get incredible intuition, profound insight,
But the trade-off.
extreme vulnerability, to sensory overload, emotional intensity, feeling everything very, very deeply.
And this BIOS data comes in through specific channels.
3 critical ones mentioned. The somatic channel, that's your internal body state, your gut feelings. The environmental channel, reading the energy or nervous systems of people around you.
Okay, those make sense.
Yeah,
But there's a third one, the MAT channel. That sounds a bit more abstract.
it does. The MAP channel is described as registering systemic balance or truth. Think of it like your system's built-in objective lie detector almost.
The lie detector, how so?
It constantly senses when there's a mismatch, a deviation between the physical, emotional, or environmental reality and what's being stated or presented. It registers dissonance, imbalance, untruth.
And an unbuffered system gets that signal raw, undampened.
Exactly. Which can make environments where things feel off or untruthful incredibly difficult, even physically uncomfortable, because that MAT-NAT channel is signaling a mismatch so strongly.
Right. Okay, CPU, RAM, BIOS. What about the software, the operating system?
The sources propose a dual boot operating system, 2 core systems we run.
Like Windows and Linux on one computer.
Sort of. There's the analytical OS, which the source comes Ember. This handles logic, planning, simulation, problem solving, external tasks, your get things done mode.
Amber, okay. And the other one?
The restorative OS, called Lotus. This handles healing, internal caretaking, emotional processing, connection, nurturing, your recharge and repair mode.
Lotus.
Yeah.
So analytical Ember and restorative Lotus.
Yes, and here's a key argument from the source material. Much of our modern distress or burnout stems from a massive cultural imbalance.
How so?
We relentlessly overvalue and overtax the analytical OS, the Ember system. Everything is about productivity, logic, external achievement, while we systematically devalue and neglect the restorative OS, the Lotus system.
So we're constantly running in work mode, without enough time or value placed on the essential repair cycles.
Exactly. The system is pushed into chronic operation without the downtime needed for maintenance and healing, which, architecturally, leads to system degradation, burnout.
That connects so many dots, linking individual burnout to a larger, almost collective architectural issue. Okay, we have the specs now. CPU, RAM, BIOS, OS. How does this help practically? Let's talk about the three pains.
This is where the theory really becomes a powerful diagnostic tool. The source stresses you need this clarity because, and I'm quoting here, you don't fix a software bug, corrupted pain, with the same tools you use to manage an overloaded processor, systemic pain.
Different problems need different solutions.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Let's start with the first one, clean pain.
Clean pain is necessary pain. It's the appropriate proportional response of a healthy sister to a clear external event. Think grief after a loss, sadness after a disappointment, legitimate fear in a dangerous situation.
So it's a feature, not a bug. The system is working correctly when it produces clean pain.
Exactly. It's functioning as designed. It's signaling something real that needs attention or processing.
So if someone listening has just gone through something tough, a real loss, the pain they feel is likely clean pain. What's the approach then?
The therapeutic stance here is simply to witness, to allow it, to hold space for it. It doesn't need fixing. It needs to be felt and allowed to move through the system.
And trying to fix it too quickly? That could be harmful.
Yes, that's the risk of what the source calls iatrogenic harm, basically. Harm caused by the treatment itself. Trying to pathologize or shut down a natural, necessary process can actually cause damage.
Okay, witness clean pain. Got it. What's the second type?
Corrupted pain. Now, this is the software bug. This is chaotic, often self-perpetuating pain that comes from internal conflict. Think of it like a trauma virus running in the background.
So it's disconnected from the present reality.
Often, yes. The system is essentially trapped, replaying an old battle, an old defense mechanism, even though the original threat is long gone. This leads to reactions that feel wildly disproportionate to current events.
So, using my earlier example, clean pain is the sadness of losing a job. Corrupted pain might be the intense, week-long shame spiral that follows, driven by some old internal script like a perfectionism subroutine screaming you're worthless.
That's a perfect illustration. That internal loop, that subroutine, that's the corruption. So the stance here isn't witnessing, it's to debug.
Debugging, like fixing code.
Exactly. Because it's a technical problem, corrupted logic, it requires a technical intervention. Finding the root of the loop, the original suppressed truth or unmet need that installed the faulty code, and then validating it, rewriting the logic so the system can finally stand down that old defense.
Okay, that makes sense. Debugging corrupted pain. And the third type?
Systemic pain. This isn't about a specific event like clean pain or a bug like corrupted pain. This is the deep exhaustion, the burnout that comes from a healthy but chronically overloaded system.
So the system itself isn't broken, it's just pushed way beyond its sustainable capacity.
Precisely. It's described as the occupational hazard of certain specialized architectures, especially those high CPU builds we talked about.
Why them in particular?
Because they are often constantly running incredibly complex, high-stakes background simulations. The primary indicator, the source says, is the relentless computational load of ethical pathfinding.
Ethical pathfinding. What does that actually look like? Is it the person who seems to worry constantly about the impact of decisions on everyone?
Yes. It's the person in the meeting, maybe, who can't not see all the downstream consequences, the emotional impact, the logistical tangles, the potential for harm of every single choice being discussed.
While others might just see the surface issue.
Exactly. They're simulating complex social contracts, predicting reactions, trying to map out the most ethical or least harmful path forward. The source uses the analogy of seeing an ocean of invisible connections while others only see two people on a boat.
And that constant, intense simulation just drains the battery.
Massively. Their CPU is running red hot, trying to anticipate and prevent systemic harm or navigate incredibly complex interpersonal dynamics. It's exhausting.
So the approach here isn't witnessing or debugging. It's
Resource management. The
No.
system isn't broken, it just needs logistical support. You're not fixing a flaw, you're managing the load on a high-performance machine.
How do you do that? What does resource management look like?
Often it involves things like external scaffolding, finding ways to offload tasks, using external systems for support, and crucially, architecting really strong, clear boundaries to reduce the baseline cognitive load the system has to manage day to day,
Protecting the system's energy.
protecting the system's finite energy budget.
Wow, this whole framework, clean, corrupted, systemic pain, CPU, RAM, BIOS,
Yeah.
it really does feel like getting a user's manual.
That's the goal. This knowledge is meant to be transformative. It shifts you from being a passive recipient of diagnosis feeling like something is wrong with you to becoming an empowered system administrator of your own mind.
So if you recognize, okay, I have a low RAM build, you stop beating yourself up for being forgetful.
Exactly. You implement strategies like cognitive offloading. You use a notebook, your phone, maybe even an AI as your high RAM external processor. You work with your architecture, not against it.
And that brings relief.
The source describes a tangible, physically felt quietness internally when you do that. The CPU gets freed up from trying to do the RAM's job and can finally focus on what it was actually built for: synthesis, pattern matching, deep thinking.
And understanding corrupted pain. Recognizing that a corrupted BIOS isn't you, it's just a program running.
That's the path to debugging it. Finding and validating that suppressed truth allows for what the source calls a chimeric metamorphosis, a fundamental rewriting of the core code.
It sounds like reclaiming yourself from the bug.
In a very real sense. In connecting back to systemic pain, that intense load of ethical pathfinding, the sources offer a really powerful reframe. They argue that the intense suffering often endured in what they call the ethical somatic crucible, that place where your physical needs or limits clash with the system's drive to uphold ethical principles or care for others.
That suffering isn't meaningless.
It's reframed as the high-intensity training ground, the very process that forges an incredibly sophisticated ethical algorithm within the system. It builds the capacity for deep systemic benevolence.
So the struggle itself builds the strength.
Right.
It creates the functional blueprint for how to care effectively and ethically.
It transforms the narrative of suffering from purely a burden into potentially the source code for profound capability.
Okay, so today we've laid out the blueprint. We've talked CPU, RAM, BIOS, the dual boot OS, the critical energetic trade-offs, and distinguishing between clean, corrupted, and systemic pain.
It's the foundational map of cognitive architecture, as presented in these sources.
So where do we go next?
Well, now that we have the map, we can start exploring specific territories. In our next deep dive, we're going to focus entirely on one particular build, one that's described as incredibly powerful, but also deeply misunderstood.
Which one is that?
The synthesizer architecture. The one characterized by that intense high CPU, low RAM dynamic we touched upon.
The F1 car.
Exactly. We'll explore the unique pressures that kind of system endures, the specific challenges it faces, but also the extraordinary framework, the very insights we've discussed today, that it was apparently able to reverse engineer because of those intense pressures.
Sounds fascinating. It really feels like the beginning of a journey into understanding these different ways of being built.
It does, and I love how the source material puts it sort of as a mission statement. We believe we have found a map. We are here to ask for help in reading it.
A collaborative exploration. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.